Patient had issues we struggled to resolve because we were still learning. That is an interesting point, and I'm sure more often than not that happens. And the only suggestion I could offer to that DR is evaluate what needs to be done. Evaluate that technology, first of all, but more importantly up front, little experience. What experience was needed, when needed, how many of them were needed, etc., etc. So the only suggestion I would offer to you and the team on something like that is proper planning and really understand what you're getting into, especially when it's new technology. So thank you guys for that. I appreciate that. All right, now let's migrate to monitoring and controlling. Again, here is another cartoon where two people are talking. My smartphone monitors my heart rate and body temperature and automatically shuts down when it senses that I'm about to lose my mind. I just thought I got a kick out of that, and I thought I'd share it with you when it comes to monitoring and controlling. So again, here, when you look at the process of monitoring and controlling, it tracks, it reports, centered around performance objectives, okay? The monitoring is throughout, primarily the life cycle where you're measuring, you're collecting, you're informing, and then the actual controlling is to make sure if something arises, what is the definition of the problem, who is best to be assigned to help resolve the problem, how can we prevent that problem from reoccurring. And again, here is that input, tool, technique, and output associated with this particular process. It compares the actual against the plan when you look at process in general, all right? It identifies any potential new risk, just like DR was explaining there as an example, okay? But when you look at monitoring and controlling, it's okay to have, say, something that's more definable, predictable, and maintain some type of steady state, let's kind of call it. And if it operates within certain ranges, the process is basically doing what it's supposed to do. Hopefully, though, you're monitoring throughout the implementation or execution. So when you look at the inputs of monitor and control, this is all of those. And in this particular case, this is where a lot of these plans, as you can see, all but a couple of these are plans in one fashion or another. They have to come together in the monitoring and controlling. When you look at schedule and cost forecasts, it's based again against those baselines that we highlighted in the previous slide. Schedule variance, schedule performance index, okay, when you look at forecasting in general. And then when you look at the associated cost forecast, again, it goes against, in fact, let me just show you. When you look at the baseline for scope, the baseline for schedule, the baseline for cost, this is where you have to have some type of good technique in terms of forecasting these particular concepts here. Cost variance, estimate at completion. Then you want to make sure that when you look at changes, change requests, you want to make sure they are validated and they are required. The necessary data is there and confirm the change was successful. Then you move on, etc., etc. The work performance is basically, collecting the data. All right. It includes maybe certain deliverables, status, change request, estimate to complete, as I said in the earlier slide. The validation of that which was performed and is soon to be performed, those expectations. This is an interesting one, team. Organizational process assets that could hopefully influence in a positive manner monitoring and controlling. Some of the financial controls issues may be a defect management, defining what an issue is, maybe what a defect is, something that failed out of a certain variance that was expected. Again, lessons learned, process measurement. Okay, these are assets where a lot of this information resides. When you look at expert judgment and analytical techniques, this more often than not is in many of the tools and techniques section of many of the 49 processes associated with the 10 knowledge areas, for what it's worth. So if you're taking the exam and they talk about which one of these is a tool and technique for a particular process, this could help get the right answer. Okay. When you look at information systems, project management, the PMIS provides that access, say, for tools. And it could be, face-to-face, virtual. You all understand, especially in this global world that we now operate in. Meetings in general, whether it be the team meeting with a stakeholder. And as you know, these meetings, as a project manager, you handle them differently. Some you get into the details, i.e., a project status meeting, but some is more high level, more red, yellow, green, we're on track, percentage complete, things of that nature for stakeholders. When you look at change requests also for the PMIS, the project management information, you want to make sure that these are captured. Okay, the intentional changes may require corrective action, maybe get in front of it proactively, or how we're going to repair to modify a particular product or a particular piece of that solution that is part of the project. When you look at work performance, updating the plan, this in general is more in the output of a particular process where you're updating certain changes, updating the plan, updating maybe change control process. And then I list some of those elements here. So again, this, when you look at muscle memory, so to speak, of the mind, when you're preparing your studying, this type of concept could really help you, say, in preparing for the exam. That's why I want to touch upon some of these also in some of these topics. So here's an example, and I like this, what I call at a glance. Okay, this is a nice at a glance of the monitor and control project work. If you see inputs, you see the tools and techniques, you see the outputs, but there's also some of those elements within it. So I hope this could be a very nice reference for you in a day in the life of managing a project. This is a nice template, team, that I put together for you in terms of measurement, frequency, target, the how, and the source. So when you're monitoring and controlling, especially using KPIs, key performance indicators, this could be a nice template that you could utilize in that particular monitoring of, say, a particular process or overall of your project in general. But the key here I want to emphasize, whatever you are measuring, make sure you have the trust, the confidence, and the integrity of that which you're measuring. Because if you could measure something, you could subsequently improve upon that something. Just something to think about, team. When you look at environmental factors, say across an enterprise, it could be governmental, could be industry, in the healthcare, the HIPAA, governmental could be disposing of certain chemicals, certain hazard material, for example. So this is kind of an area that is very important within monitoring and controlling, especially when you look at CO, sustainability, things to that nature, so that you're, as a good corporate citizen, doing your particular role in the environment. So here's an example of the process simply called monitor and control project work. As you can see, there's a number of inputs, as I touched upon earlier, some of those tools and techniques, and then the reports, the outputs, the updates, things to that nature. So a good reference to consider. So team, here is our third simple, hopefully fun exercise where we could learn from each other. Here, again, in just a few words, what environmental factor challenge occurred, say, in a previous project? Maybe it was positive. Maybe, unfortunately, it was negative in overall monitoring and controlling your project work process, personal or professional. And then again, include your challenge in the group chat window. So here's an example, team, of what I'd be looking for. The challenge. Was it governmental? Was it organizational authorization? Was it stakeholder? Or maybe was it centered around tools and applications that need to interface with those PMIS, the Project Management Information System? And then in just a couple of words, was it positive? Was it negative? So I'll leave this up on the screen. Team, take 3 minutes and think about an example of a previous or current project centered around monitoring and controlling, whether it be you as the project manager or you as a team member on the project, where you may have had some of these challenges, and was it positive or negative from a monitoring and controlling? I appreciate it, team. So just in a few words, select one of the challenges or select something different in a positive manner that it may have occurred for you. What project monitor and control situation, personal or professional, would you like to share your experience? And was it a good result or a not so good result from a lessons learned standpoint? Everybody's thinking. I know you're not bashful. Just a few words. Monitoring and controlling. It's got to be a couple. Thank you, DR. MW, thank you. I like that, the banking industry. I spent a number of years with a customer, a bank here in Ohio. All right, so keep them coming, team. Thank you, JL. So let's just start with DR. Monitoring monthly spend, challenge incurred, are related to the timing. Interesting. When the financials are available and all the different departments involved to collect the data. We have a system in place, but there's room for improvement. What's interesting on that, there's, quote, room for improvement. It'd be interesting what some of those improvement wants or needs would include in terms of maybe a newer, more robust with features or functionality, to help monitor that spend and hopefully get it in a timely manner, DR. So thank you for that. And then we go to MW, good results, making sure banking industry project is up to regulatory requirements. And as I said, MW, I would say for about 12 years, I was a project manager on a large Midwest bank here in the United States. And especially when the 2008 financial crisis happened, I'm sure if you were around at that time doing what you're doing in the banking industry, MW, all hell broke loose on that across the board. So I could fully understand and appreciate what you're saying there. And then JL, the COVID impact. Thank you for sharing that. Team, I could tell you in my customer success management certification classes and obviously classes that I do for project management for O'Reilly, that pandemic has turned everything upside down. How we work, where we work, what we work, you name it, whether it be academics, whether it be business, whether it be politics, whether it be sports, all supplies have been impacted. That is so true in terms of that supply chain, what I call food chain, etc. So thank you. I'm glad, JL, you mentioned that. All right. Well, team, thank you for your input on that. Let's now transition. I think you're going to enjoy this section also, called PM methodologies. And this is an interesting cartoon I thought you'd get a kick out of, where the project meeting became tense as Henry, a process improvement black belt, and Cedric, the social media wizard, clashed over budget restraints. So when you're looking at methodologies, a couple of things I wanted to share up front from Project Management Institute. 89% of project managers surveyed just a couple of years ago said that they implement a hybrid methodology. I thought that was interesting. And forward-thinking PMs, and believe me, I'm sure there's many of you out there today, do not adhere to just a single methodology. And I'll touch upon what that means, team, in a little bit. But you have learned how to mesh these various methodologies based on the project that you're trying to lead for those you're serving. So how do you define project management methodology? Again, according to Project Management Institute, it's a system of practices, techniques, procedures, and rules. And it's going to basically say how we're going to do and the way we're going to do a project. And there are a smorgasbord of ways to do it. Different principles, framework, processes, standards, on and on and on. And I'll again highlight some of those for your team shortly. Since there is no one size fits all regarding a methodology, time and effort is needed up front to best determine which makes sense. So the goal and the practical consideration, use the best practice framework to get your project successfully completed as desired. The benefits of a methodology, hopefully it's definable, it's hopefully repeatable, hopefully it's predictable, and it streamlines execution, enhances performance, okay? And hopefully it could even further enhance skills, hopefully reduce risk sooner than later. And when it's all said and done, if you got the right methodology, you're going to be on time, on schedule, meeting certain deliverables, deadlines, things of that nature. Now, I put together here, team, some steps to consider when trying to determine what methodology should we utilize for this project. Is it a total enterprise network refresh? Is it building a new software platform? Is it building a bridge? Whatever it is, consider your factors in their simple and potential complex state in terms of factors that are in this bucket or factors that may be over here. And some of those factors should also include what type of resources. What risk do you know at that time? How challenging is the schedule? How flexible and how rigid is the environment you're about to do this project? Will your methodology adapt to that environment? And when it's all said and done, consider what delivers hopefully the highest value possible. You know, as many of you have been doing project management, say for a number of years, traditionally, what defines success of a project? On time, within budget, quality satisfaction of the end customer. Today, now more than ever, team, they are still important, but delivering the most value is business value. Business value. Because I'm sure many of you have been involved in projects where it's on time, within budget, the quality was there, but the customer didn't see it to be a successful project. Things happen for whatever reason. Just something to think about, team. When you look at leveraging your organizational goals, what I mean by this is to make sure it becomes a win-win. Say you and the company you represent, a win for the company, a customer that you're serving. And list what's important of your company, of your team, what is value to you. All right? So that certain habits, certain opinions, certain values are at least honored, and they are truly applicable to this type of methodology. So when it's all said and done, team, practical considerations. No one methodology is better than any other one. It comes down to what is the goal? What is the value system within it? Constraints. What are the stakeholders? Again, if you have 5 stakeholders, are there 10 different type of methodologies? If so, somehow, some way, you're going to have to crank up that leadership style and say, hey, we've done this, been there, done it successfully. This is the way we're going to do it, and here is why, to convince them in terms of negotiation, that human skill I touched upon earlier. All right. So let's talk about 2 popular methodologies, Scrum and Agile. But let's begin with the following. I'm sure all of you, especially today, talk about across your peers with whomever. Scrum and Agile. Okay? But you even hear people say, well, they are the same. There's no difference. Others may say, no, wait a minute. They are not the same. So the question, team, comes down to, which one is it? How do we make this hopefully clearer and easier to understand, especially if you, as the project manager, you're trying to formulate what is the best methodology for this project you're about to get in the middle of? I think the best way to answer that question is to understand the beginning, as they say. Early in the IT arena especially, software was developed that followed, as an example, what's called a waterfall approach. It was a linear approach where each phase started only when the previous phase was completed. And thus the waterfall type of analogy, the requirements, system design, implement, test, all the way down to develop and then maintain accordingly. This approach focused simply on process, tools, documentation, contract negotiation, and I'm sure many of you have been there and done it. And this is the plan. However, it became clear that this approach doesn't work for many, many types of projects, especially being rigid. Difficult, especially in the software arena, changes. Sometimes it could be time consuming where you add more and more time because of, say, issues that may have occurred that need to be addressed. And these are just a few of them, team. And then about 20 years ago, a new way of thinking was discussed. And what this meant, team, was a group of software developers met in Park City, Utah, in the United States. And these developers, subject matter experts, come together to basically ask the following question. What the heck can we put together to create in order that it could be a methodology primarily for software and get it to market not only sooner, hopefully as much defect-free as possible? They recognize 2 possible opportunities. Shorten the delay of benefits, meaning give it to a user sooner than later to try it, and get that feedback quicker to adjust accordingly, rather than wait for a phase to complete, start the next, start the next, start the next. And while this meeting did not result in the true agile methodology that we know it today, it was the milestone that triggered this methodology. Speed, feedback, and continuous improvement, all of which are part of Agile today. So, if you were to compare, team, the waterfall, as I said a couple slides ago, now to this new approach centered around flexibility rather than rigidity, it gives you that compare and contrast. Individual, interaction, working software, try it, get the feedback, collaborate, respond accordingly. This flexible methodology can, oh, by the way, be used. Remember I talked up front, this hybrid approach, okay, could be used potentially with other methodologies. That umbrella picture I'm trying to show here. And Scrum could be one of them. Each of these frameworks can now follow this concept of flexibility, whether it be Kanban, FDD, the feature-driven, extreme programming. And this list, team, as many of you know, goes on and on and on. So, when you look at that concept, and Agile being the umbrella, and you look at the individual interaction, the software, collaboration, you respond, then it basically means constant communication. This thing called sprints. What is a sprint? It's a short period of time where teams work to complete task milestones, deliverables, using iterations to break the schedule into blocks of time in smaller goals to achieve that could be obviously accomplished. Share it with the customer, feedback, every time it is required in terms of change, responding to change. This team of software developers that came together about 20 years ago, they then created what's called the principles behind this agile concept. I won't go into detail here, but some of the items I highlighted in bold: early, continuous, welcoming change, delivering software frequently, working together, motivating, like I talked about earlier, team, the environment, the support, the face-to-face, the collaboration. How do you measure progress? KPIs, okay? Sustainable development, hopefully somewhat more predictable. A constant type of pace, all right? Continuous attention. Agility. Simplicity. I like to always remind myself when I'm doing and managing a project, keep it simple, Sam. The KISS principle. Self-organizing teams. These, again, sprints, for example. The team reflects how to be more effective and adjusts accordingly. Again, highlighting the principles behind this. So therefore, on the surface, you could see why Agile and Scrum can, for the most part, be confused. They both rely on certain things, meaning process, interaction, collaboration. But if you're still somewhat confused, what I have here, team, for you is what I call an at-a-glance compare and contrast of Agile and Scrum, a philosophy, a methodology, delivered at the end, sprints, etc., etc. And then Agile does not always mean Scrum. Many different methodologies, as I said in that umbrella, use this Agile approach for project management. Okay? So I hope this helps at least frame up some of the similarities, yet some of the difference of these two key project methodologies. Now, if I were to then map this in terms of method specificity, okay, that is a theme, a principle, a process, a standard, and I incorporate some of the other common ones that are in existence today. When you look at theme, lean, or Prince 2 and Agile, more of a principle. When you look at process, as I said earlier, the waterfall, for example, and then standards. Extreme programming could be one, and our dear global governance, PMI, could be another one, leveraging the project management book of knowledge, the PMBOK. So that's a nice perspective of framing them and positioning them. This is another way of framing and positioning many of these types of methodologies, team. And what this is trying to say, comparing stability, dynamic, speed, and structure. So, for example, if you look at waterfall, it's stability, but yet very structured, okay? When you look at stability, but having some form of dynamic, is obviously the PMBOK, for example. And then lastly, when you look at very dynamic, interactive, speed, things of that nature, Agile and Scrum fit that type of concept. So, what I like us to do, this exercise, it's just 2 slides that I want to walk you through, and we'll go through this together. And what this is a use case methodology example of Agile when I was at Cisco Systems not too long ago. And this use case example leverages the Agile methodology, where Cisco wanted to move from the waterfall digital IT type of projects. They switched to Agile for these particular type of projects, billing, WebEx, development, and they recorded the effects of adopting this, what's called scaled Agile framework, and found 40% decrease in their critical defects and 15% increase in the removal efficiency of these defects. But what's also interesting here, team, the employees at Cisco were happier because it made their life easier. They didn't have to work many after hours, reduction to attend, a variety of sometimes maybe monotonous meetings. But the lesson learned here is the best practice was to adjust as needed to Agile to fit their objective, to fit their team, and to fit now this new process that they implemented. Again, back to the earlier slide of if you're going to be assigned to lead a project, that tender loving care up front, what are we trying to do that hopefully you could figure out what is the best method to do it. But also it eliminated unintegrated, loosely integrated projects where they simply didn't make sense to be a part of this. So I just wanted to share this real life example not too long ago at Cisco Systems. And then the conclusion, selecting a methodology depends on many variables. Agile was the methodology because it helped to deliver those outcomes, lower defects, efficiencies. And what's also interesting here, team, Cisco focused more in a bigger perspective, a bigger, higher level look. And the key was the commitment to reducing and improving based